Welcome to Coastal Front. Join us each week as we sit down with the movers and shakers of Vancouver to discuss stories of business, politics, accomplishment, and failure. Our aim is to keep you dialed into what matters most in our city. Now, here's your host, Andrew Johns.
Okay, Debbie Butt, you are the Director of Communications and Community Events for the Vancouver Canuck Hospice Society. Is that what it's called? Vancouver?
It's called Canuck Place.
Canuck Place.
Children's Hospice. Yes.
Canuck Place Children's Hospice. Sorry I didn't get the right.
No, that's okay.
But thanks for coming in today. This is so exciting to have you here.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here, Andrew.
Yeah.
Thanks for including me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is the website, Canuck Place Children's Hospice, canuckplace.org.
Yes.
How long have you been involved with Canuck Place?
I've been with the organization for 7 years, but was involved with them prior to that. I actually worked at the Vancouver Canucks and the Canucks for Kids Fund. So at the time when I was introduced to the organization, Canuck Place was a beneficiary of the Canucks for Kids Fund. So I came to know and understand the organization. I was actually working for the Vancouver Grizzlies.
Oh, really?
At the time that Canuck Place opened.
Okay.
So Canuck Place opened in 1995, which, as you may recall, that was the first year of the Vancouver Grizzlies. And the ownership group at the time was called Orca Bay Sports and Entertainment.
Yeah.
And they owned both the Vancouver Hockey Club and the Vancouver Grizzlies.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Griffiths family, right?
Yeah, the Griffiths family. So Arthur Griffiths was one of the founders.
Yeah.
Brenda Ang was the leading charge. She was she was a nurse, an oncology nurse at BC Children's Hospital.
Okay.
She went to England where there are pediatric palliative care hospices. There were none in North America at that time. And so she went there for about 6 months just to study and to see what was going on. She felt there was a better way that children who were facing end of life and families could be cared for.
Right.
So she went to look at the pediatric hospice model in England. And at that time, I think they started in about 1980, 1985. And she came back and she said, we must do this here.
Okay.
So she got together with an advertising guy in town, big dude, George Jarvis.
Okay.
So Palmer Jarvis,
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, but George
definitely.
Jarvis is... so she got together with him, and the publisher at the time at the Vancouver Sun, and then they went to Arthur Griffiths and his family and said, "Could you support this?" And that's what happened. So also at the time, Gordon Campbell was the mayor of Vancouver, and the city had just been given a property that had some parameters around it that it could only be used for a children's charity. So Glenbrae, which is on Matthews Avenue in Shaughnessy, that became Canuck Place, and the city leases it to Canuck Place for $1 a year. And they retrofitted it. They had to make a medical floor, make it medical quality, but it's a beautiful old home. It's got 4 family suites on the 3rd floor and 9 patient beds on the clinical floor. And then basically the main area and the entranceway and everything, there's a kitchen and there's a school room and there's an art room, there's a volcano room, there's a snoozlin room. So it's all about how do you make those moments that really matter? How do you make the best environment to ensure that families that have little time together make the most of that time?
That's amazing. So if we go back to before Canuck Place was created, where would children go if they were terminally ill? They would just have to stay at home, or they would go into a sterile hospital and just...
They would go to BC Children's Hospital, which, at the time, I mean, that's what did occur in North America in many places. Yeah. So England, as I said, was the only, model at the time. So yes, that's where they would go. And because of what Brenda Ang, what she brought forth, and she did bring forth...
Is she still around, by the way?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Yeah, and she still comes... I mean, she doesn't work at Canuck Place anymore, and she's doing amazing things. I think I'm not sure, somewhere in the U.S. where she's building some infrastructure. So Canuck Place was the first freestanding pediatric palliative care hospice in North America.
Wow.
There was no other at the time, and now there's I think there's seven or eight in North America, and they've all come to look at the model here and to replicate in the communities that they're in. And
what a neat story.
Yeah, it is fabulous. Yeah. And I think, the amazing thing is to have someone, come in the medical field to come forward with that. But I feel that they also brought a community around it. Like, to have that partnership with the Vancouver Canucks for all that time is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. To have that, that sense of community, and that people felt this place is needed for British Columbia. And we have a unique model of care for pediatrics in British Columbia. We've got one main children's hospital.
Right?
Yeah. And the model really, really works well. So all the referrals for our program come through BC Children's, and for our perinatal care, it comes through BC Women's.
Okay.
So it's like...
Because this is going to be one of my questions is, how do families kind of become, introduced to Canuck Place, and how do they, I got to assume that there's probably more demand for spots at Canuck Place than there is room. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I'm sure you have to turn away some families. I don't know.
So what happens is a child will be, whether they're in utero, and that would be through BC Women's, or through Children's, they will be diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. They will be between the ages of 0 and 19.
Okay. And
their diagnosis means that they will die before the age of 19.
Okay.
So that's basically how it happens. And they, whether have a central nervous system, immunologic, like there's all different kinds of diseases and conditions. We actually look after about 190 different diseases and conditions, some of them very rare and complex. And it's not like adult hospice care. So, adult hospice care, your end of life, you have about maybe a 3-month window at most, and you receive palliative care in a hospice. Pediatric palliative care, our kids are on our program for an average of 7 years.
Really?
Right? Wow. So it's different.
But they're not staying there for 7 years.
They're not staying in house. For the most part, our kids and families are cared for in their own communities, and mostly this 24-hour care is made possible by their mom and dad.
Okay.
So how do you help and support those families? They're dealing with grief already because they've just been given notice that their child has some sort of, something that they're going to die before the age of 19. That's a struggle. How do they continue to work? How do they continue to have a relationship with their spouse? What do they do? Because the care is very intensive. So what we provide for families is 20 days of respite care. That means they can come in-house, they stay upstairs, or if they're going on holidays with their other children, they can go and they can know that their child has a place to stay, and that they require nursing care and physician care, and that there's a place for them to go. So families get the rest that they need, recover, and then they can kind of go back. The other thing that we do is that families will, through these diseases and conditions, their health declines. They become more symptomatic. So we support the family in figuring out, okay, let's bring that child in for pain and symptom management, help support the family to address the decline that is occurring, and then support that family so they can go back into the community. Families want to be at home.
Sure. Yeah.
And then when it does come time for end of life, we are able to provide that care. They're familiar. They know that nurses know the children. They know what's going through the child. They know the siblings, volunteers. We have over 400 volunteers on our program.
Really?
They provide about 24,000 hours a year. It is unbelievable. We could not...
24,000 hours a year.
24,000 hours a year. So we couldn't do what we do because, who looks after the siblings?
Right.
We have these fabulous volunteers. Who helps make the meals? Right? So that families are provided with meals. That is supported by our volunteer team. We even have volunteer housekeepers to support our existing volunteer team because you know what? We're a working hospital. Mm-hmm. Everything needs to be clean. Right?
I think that's a really good point, is you're a working hospital, because I think that's something that, before we started recording, we were talking about, well, your Canuck Place, you probably have, oodles of money. You're, maybe people even assume you're owned by the Canucks, but that's not the case.
No.
And you are a hospital. You're providing real healthcare.
Yes.
And very, emotionally driven. I mean, I got to think this has got to be very intensive from an emotional perspective. Like a lot of people coming in there with some real, heavy hearts. This is going to be a tough place to work at times, I imagine, is it? Or do you kind of become immune to it, or what?
It's such a good question. And you're not the first person who's like, oh, it must be so sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I observe every day, when I go into the hospice and I see families, I feel really great about what I do, because I know what I'm doing is I'm supporting them through a very difficult time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's joyful. I'm saying that's for purpose driven.
Absolutely.
I feel really good about that. But I think what I observe is you just see how much people love one another.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't that what we're here to do? And so
well, and especially if you're taking a lot of the stresses of regular life away from those parents to allow them to have that bandwidth to be able to express that love towards their kids, and for the siblings to do so as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's because it's for children. It's a place of joy.
Right.
Yeah, everything about it is there's delight around each corner.
I gotta imagine these terminally ill children probably, maybe, unlike us older people who would probably lie there in pity, they're probably just, as vibrant as they possibly could be.
Yeah, they go to school. There's a school on site. Right. They're on an outing with the recreation therapy team. They're going to camp, and it doesn't matter that they're in a power wheelchair. They're going to take them on a zip line.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the world needs to shape around the kids, our kids, right?
Yeah.
At Canuck Place. How do we make the world adaptable for them and accessible? And so as they're going through what they're going through, how do you help them experience and make memories with their families? Because that's what their families are going to need. And if this is the known, and this is we know that it's terminal, what do we do?
Mm-hmm.
How do we make the most of the time that's available?
Yeah.
So, that's really, so to your point, it is a house of joy.
Yeah.
There is sadness, and, when you walk in the main area of both our hospices, you go in there and there's a lamp. It's got a green shade, and the green shade.
By the way, is this lamp on your website at all? This
no,
okay.
But it's not. But if the green lamp is on, it means that there's a child in house who's end of life.
Oh.
And so that they know, that in the next 24 or 48 hours, that child will pass. And it allows everybody in the house to have a sense of reverence.
Wow.
And it's not that joy stops. It's not that the fun stops. It's reverence. It's just that acceptance that there's something that is happening, and that everybody just needs to be aware. And it's
I have to admit, I'm getting choked up just listening to you talk about this with 3 young kids.
Yeah.
Crystal, as you know, has been involved in the Gift of Time Gala for I think 3 or 4 years now.
4 years, yeah. She's been amazing.
Yeah, well, you guys,
thank you for letting your wife come on board, because she's been wonderful.
Well, you guys, that's why I married her. And so I've been to the gala, and it's a phenomenal gala, and I cry every year, as I think everybody. And this last year one was really interesting, because you had this family talk about the son who, first of all, it was amazing, the story about how when he was younger, his best friend went to Canuck Place.
Yeah, the Domingos.
Domingos. And go ahead.
So the story, it was fascinating. It is to me too, because we live in such a, how could these two humans be connected in that way?
Right.
So the Domingo, Emmanuel, and his wife, Teresa, spoke about their son, Christian.
Yes.
And Christian graduated from Vancouver College. He was an outstanding athlete. He wanted to be a veterinarian. He was 18 years old, and on the prime of his life, he was going to go play football of U of S.
Yeah.
And he got a scholarship there, and he was going to go and study to be a veterinarian. 2 days after.
And those images that they showed, you see this young fellow, like he
is
buffed.
He is like so
you look
strong.
at a picture of a kid like that, and you're like, there's this guy's going, he's going to have a good, long, healthy life.
And he was diagnosed 2 days after graduation with cancer.
Yeah.
So he was in and out of children's, and they was in and out of the BC Cancer Agency. So trying to think, and it didn't. Christian, all through high school, wore the number 11 as his football number. And he wore that number because his best friend was a boy named Mitchell Ho, who collapsed at Vancouver College on the playground when he was 11 years old. He had a pre-existing heart condition, and he went into a coma and never came out. And so his parents, Sarah and Stephen Ho, they created an award at the school. And so Christian was inspired by Mitchell, wore that number 11. And then when he was in grade 12, he received the award honoring Mitchell Ho. So he knew about Canuck Place, and because he'd been there to see his friend when he was at end of life. And those two families are so intimately connected. And then obviously Christian received chemo care. It did not work, and he was at end of life. And he was struggling. He was
21 when he
was 19.
19.
Yeah, I believe 19. And he struggled to not want to go to Canuck Place because he knew that was the place that his friend died. And cancer has a different. We don't see our kids that are with cancer until very end of life. So they wouldn't because they're receiving chemo.
Okay.
They are fighting to the very end. That's inherent in that disease.
Okay.
Right? It's not.
And that's not administered at the Canuck Place.
No.
That's something that would be done through the
Children's Hospital or at the BC Cancer Agency. That's where they would receive the chemotherapy.
Okay.
If we have a child that's been referred to our program and oncology says we just can't do, there's nothing. If that child and that family want to continue with chemo care, we make that possible.
Okay.
Because you want to encourage hope, right?
Sure, of course.
And you never know.
Yeah.
So Christian passed away at Canuck Place, and it was an incredible story of connection. And now these two families, because another big part of our care is families don't end their relationship with Canuck Place when their child passes. It continues because they need to recover from their grief.
Right.
How do they do that? They need to do it through grief counseling. They need it to bereavement counseling. They need to... And
Canuck Place supports this as well?
And that's Canuck Place. A very large part of our clinical team includes a counseling team that supports families not only while their child is living, but after their child passes. And also for the siblings. We even have grandparents groups. So we have grandparent groups where they come together in bereavement and talk to one another and support them. We do it also remotely. So we have an online counseling sessions because our families live all over the province. They don't just live here. So in addition to the in-hospice care, we are also outpatient providers. So we have something called enhanced community care.
Okay.
So we have nurse practitioners who go into family homes. So we could have a child who is end of life, and that means their acuity is pretty high. That's like 4 or 5, a high acuity scale.
What does that mean? Maybe you can take for a second and explain that.
Yeah, so we've developed an acuity scale that basically goes from 1 to 5.
Okay.
And that defines how many patients that we can have on staff. We don't have another ward. So if you're in a hospital and you have a child that's a lower acuity, you can send them to another ward from an ICU.
Sure.
We don't have another ward. We just have our hospices and we just have our beds. So basically what we do is we have a fixed number of nursing staff. We don't have any more or any less. We have a fixed ratio. We can't increase the number of nursing staff. So that determines what acuity we can have on. So if we have 3 or 4 kids at end of life, we can't fill all our beds.
Right.
Because we have to have a ratio of nursing 1-to-1. And we don't have any place to send those kids who are lower acuity.
And a child that's near end of life, I'm assuming needs virtually
higher, more complex care.
More complex care, more attention.
Yes.
More time from the nurses that can't be.
Yes.
Whereas if you had, say,
a lower acuity.
Children,
You have
you can kind
the
of split
ratio.
it between the, gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And we have a fixed ratio. So it's not like we can bring in more nurses on one shift. Our budget allows us to do this.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
so you're going back to, you said you were talking about how there's a lot of outpatient care.
Yeah. So
where the nurses are looking at the acuity levels of.
Yes. So we'll go in. So if we have high acuity and the request of that family is like the child, they live on Hornby Island and it's really important to them, their end of life, they're perhaps a pediatric cancer patient, we go to their home so that the parent can be a parent and love their child.
And the child passes away in their home?
And the child passes away in their home.
Oh, wow.
So we provide that as well as an option because families need choices.
Yeah.
They need choices when they're facing something very difficult, like the loss of their child. So how can would you like that in home? Would you like that in our hospice? Wow. How can we support you?
That's amazing that this is incredible. I'm learning so much. What percentage of the families would elect to have their child's end of life happen at home versus in the hospice? Oh,
that's a really good question. So I want to say that there were this past fiscal, around 81 deaths on program.
Yeah.
So of those, I want to say that maybe 12 to 15 opted to have in-home care. 12 to 15 of those.
81.
Yeah.
So you had in the last 12 months, fiscal 12 months, you had 81 children pass away.
Yes.
That's like one child every 5 days.
Yes. Yes.
And is that normal or is that?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think normal. It's been increasing. Those numbers have increased gradually in the last 25 years.
Just because of your capacity, you're being able to manage?
I think it's about capacity. I think it's about population.
Oh, I see.
I think it's about referrals. Right. I think there's a whole bunch of things that are kind of wrapped up in that number.
What percentage of the children pass away from cancer?
I think that on our program, I would say that it's about 35% of deaths on program. Don't quote but it's around that number. About 35% of deaths on program are from cancer. Okay. But we almost see for all the kids in the province who pass away from cancer, we see over 95% of those kids.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
is cancer the highest? If you look at all the different, because you mentioned there's 189 different
190 190 different illnesses and conditions and illnesses that we look at. And I mean, some of our kids on our program, they're their only child in the province that has that. Right? That's it.
Incredible.
And I mean, I think that.
So do you have access to all the specialists in the province as far as doctors are concerned? Like if you have a very unique case, a child that's got some very, unique illness, are you able to tap the shoulders of certain doctors in the province? Do they volunteer their time? Do they get paid? How does that work? Well,
so our physicians, we have 4 physicians on staff, and our physicians are the experts. So they do, there are specialists, but that specialist wouldn't necessarily have an understanding or know that basically once the diagnosis is made, they are referred to our program. There's some cross things that do happen. So, if you have a child that has SMA type 1, so SMA kids now, spinal muscular atrophy, and there's type 1, type 2, they have, there's a new drug that's made available, Esperanza, I think it's called, and it helps, it supports the child in terms of keeping their mobility. A child with SMA also at some point, because of the degeneration in their bones and their musculature, they will get they could get a rod put in their back. We don't do operations. We don't do intervention operations. That child will still be in our program, but they will be seeing a specialist that will be putting that rod in their back. Mm-hmm. So that's where the crossover happens. But we would not necessarily work with a specialist per se. It's that the referral basically comes our way, and then our physician team and clinical team looks after that child.
Okay. So when you look, that's great. Thank you. So when you look back to what causes children to die, you've got 190 different illnesses. Some of them obviously very obscure. Is cancer the number one? Is it the big?
No. You know, if you were to look at our diagnostic chart, I think what you would find is that the kids as I mentioned earlier, when kids have cancer, they don't come to our program till very late.
Okay. Because
they're getting active intervention care through chemo and radiation, right? That's not what we do.
Right.
We take a child once the referral has been made to say this child will pass before the age of 19. Okay. And so it's not until oncology gives up, and they're not giving up. Yeah. Oncology has said, we've given this child chemo 3 times. It's not. The tumor is growing. This is happening. We do not see any other effective measure. We cannot do any more chemo. It's going to, it'll impact the child. So that's when the referral is made. So although they make cancer oncology patients make a large percentage of our children who pass on program, they're active on program. So if we were to look at our diagnostics chart to say, here's the conditions and diseases on program, you have that, as I said, the chromosomal, the neurological, the immunological. So we have, those are larger, take a larger percentage of children active on program.
Yeah.
But when you look at children and what the taxonomy or what they died from, cancer makes up a bigger portion.
I see.
Yes.
What about the ages of these children? You mentioned from 6 months out to 19, but is there a particular...
0 to 19.
Or 0 to 19.
So we work with BC women. So if a child has been diagnosed in utero, that they have something like a trisomy 3, which means that child will not thrive. They may die at birth, they may die before birth, or they may only live for like 6 months. We become the consult team. So we'll go to BC Women's, we'll have a consult meeting with the mom and dad and the babies in utero and talk about what might happen to prepare them, and to prepare them what's going to happen at birth, to prepare them as best we can with, what their first, what their child's life might look like for the first, and support them in grieving that they've just got the diagnosis. There's a sense of loss there. And then we also set up an opportunity, because that's a very short period of time for that family. So we'll set up a photographer to come in and capture that child being born. We'll set up an opportunity to make a memory piece. So hand molds, right? These things, or a necklace that has a footprint of the child in, because ultimately, in the end, when that child does pass, and whether, after the child's born, then they come to Canuck Place and they stay there until the child passes. What that family needs is they need to say, I was pregnant, I had a baby, and my baby's no longer here, but my baby lived. And whether that baby lived in the utero or that baby thrived outside the womb for a few days, that is important to that family. And we can't shun that anymore. We have to acknowledge life.
Yeah.
Right. It's such an important thing to do. And that's what Canuck Place, plays a role as well with our perinatal program.
Okay. Wow. Well, speaking about, about life and about death, one of the topics politically that's come up a lot in our guys' last couple decades is assisted dying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's one I think that people can get, can wrap their heads around for an older person, like an adult or an elderly person. But is there talk around the water cooler about the pros and cons of assisted dying for children?
So that's a really interesting question, because right now the legislation is for I believe it's over 19. So the discussion has not even entered into pediatrics. Mm-hmm. And so even in the adult realm, if we had really good palliative care available for adults, and I know there is a really good system, but if it was accessible to all, then the whole premise of palliative care is ease suffering, and so there wouldn't be a need for MAID.
Okay.
And there may be, that's a controversial subject, but
that's a good point, because that's what I'm thinking about. Like, if I had a daughter, or one of my daughters or my son were terminal, and I saw them suffering, and I knew there was zero hope, and maybe I know that they're going to pass in 48 hours or 72 hours, I would like to be able to just help facilitate that now so they don't have to be in pain.
Mm-hmm. And the intent and what happens at Canuck Place is, we are experts in pain management.
Right.
So
because it's going to be so scary for the little children.
Yes. So our physicians, what they're working on in our nursing and our clinical team, we're working on ways with which to ease the suffering of that child to ensure that they are not suffering and that they're not feeling pain. And, it's not to say that children don't feel pain, but like we get called all the time, like, how do we, we've got this kid, we're trying to figure this out. The referral happens. And the thing we get at right away, how do we stop that child from suffering? We had a child that, they were up in Kelowna. The family was there. The daughter had been crying and throwing up for months, and they couldn't figure it out. They'd worked it. They came. They were admitted through our program. They came in. And we helped that family. She stopped throwing up.
Wow.
She stopped suffering, and that's the intent. But we also want to make sure that child's lucid and present.
Sure.
Right. So it's a fine balance of figuring out. But the intent and purpose of palliative care is to provide that ease of suffering, manage pain and symptoms, and provide joyful moments and memories for that family. And so that does not fit in that context of that there's no need for physician-assisted death.
I see. Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of things do kids? This is great. I'm going to try and make it all the way through without crying. It's got to be tough. I don't know what would be worse, seeing children passing away or children suffering from pain. You've got a lot of staff and volunteer people, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there that are really strong-willed. And that's probably why they're doctors and nurses, because they can handle this. And there's people like me who struggle. Even if I cut my finger, I get feeling queasy. Never mind the concept of seeing a young child pass away. Is there some kind of support service for the volunteers and the people who work there, in the similar way that they're starting to identify with, say, police services, where they're finally starting to wake up to, hey, there's a lot of PTSD within the police force that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, so we have a really comprehensive benefits plan, obviously, for our for all our staff,
right,
including our clinicians. And but in addition to that, annually we have a nursing retreat where our nurses are able to go to unload, to share, to facilitate, anything that they're dealing with. When we've had a particularly intense patient in-house that has that has been very, very difficult, we provide an opportunity for all our clinicians to get together, to talk, to unload, to be able to share. And then we also have an internal employee team. It's called Care for the Caregiver. And the whole intent behind that is like, how do we support one another when we're going through really difficult times? Because to your point, you're not immune to a child passing, and you can,
Sure,
there's all those things that you've done to help that family, and there's things that were brought, how you feel you've made a really a big difference, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't impact you.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's a really big part of the work that we do, as an organization, is ensure that all our caregivers are cared for as well.
Yeah.
And I think there's always more that we could do.
Sure.
Right. We're always looking for ways that we can augment the support of our team to ensure that they feel the support that they need and that they can go back to work. So every Tuesday we have rounds, clinical rounds, which something that happens at like a hospital, it happens at a hospice too. So it's a very unique, and it's really an example of our interdisciplinary care. So children who have just been in-house, children coming in-house, children who are being supported in their homes, children who are being supported in hospital, because we also do that too. We are the consult team, so we will see children in hospital as well. So you have all these choice of care places. And so we'll have all our clinicians. So we'll have our nursing, we'll have our physician team, we'll have our housekeeping team, we'll have our food services team, we'll have our volunteer team, we'll have all these people will be included in rounds. Our school teacher, our counselors, our recreation therapists, they will all be included in this rounds. And it all starts with recognizing the children that have passed that week.
Oh, wow.
And so it's given to, there's candles in the middle of the room. This is how it starts. And so the nurse who was at home with that child will come and she says, this is for Amelia.
Right.
And she'll light the candle. There's a moment of silence.
See, now I'm crying.
But it's about the recognition of life, right? It's so all these people feel this.
I wouldn't make it all the way through.
All these, they're nurse, they're specialists. They're so specialized in their care because they're caring for really complex cases. But they all have a connection to that family too. It's not. You're right. It's not. Yeah. There's not a disconnect between. That they just move through their day or their job,
sure.
Right? And it allows for everyone to have, a thoughtful meditation around that life, that life was important, that family is important. And, that family is still connected to us, right?
Sure.
Because Amelia's mom and dad are going to be on our counseling and bereavement program.
Right.
Right? They're probably going to get a little music therapy. There's going to be part of, remembering our children.
So it's not just about sending them away and saying,
they're always connected to the organization. Yeah. And, you think that hospice has such significance for them because that's where they spent their last days with their child. So there's memories connected to that, right? And so there's always that connection. And then those siblings will be looked after. Amelia's brothers and sisters will be looked after as well because they'll be getting sibling support group. Mm-hmm. So it's, so there's always a connection to the family, although it moves from team to team, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm talking about that interdisciplinary care, when you're sitting there at rounds and you have the cook, and the cook says, Grandma was in house, and she was staying up in the family room, and she's a diabetic. And so I'm just going to put we just need to make sure we know that. So the counseling team, they get that. They know that, Grandma's a diabetic. Okay, we're wondering I wonder how Grandma's doing. We got to make sure that we check in on her, that the nursing team knows that. It becomes this really well-rounded care, right? And that everybody has a part of it, right? The housekeeping team, that little boy, the little brother, he loves to go outside and play in the dirt. I think we're just going to offer, they only brought so much stuff down from Fort St. John, so many clothes. So we're just going to make sure we wash his clothes.
Right.
There's all these little pieces that come together and are threads that are so important. And the family, the intent is to make it seamless for them so that they don't have to worry about anything but their child.
Yeah.
And they don't even have, we want to also say that they don't have to worry about their child because they're being cared for by our nurses and physicians.
Yeah. Wow. This is your website here. Now, let's go to the About Us, Ross. And let's go to our team. I want to talk about your team for a second.
Mm-hmm.
We won't go through everybody because I think there's a lot of people, right? Yes. How many paid staff do you have?
I think we're part-time and full-time. I think we're at about 180. And that's super high because that's, you think about 24-hour care and nurses at 2 locations working 24 hours.
Yeah. Let's start with that. Where are your 2 locations? Because I'm familiar, obviously, with the house that you mentioned. But
so we have a hospice at Glen Bray, and that one's been around for 25 years. We built a second location in the Fraser Valley. Fraser Valley Health Region is the largest growing healthcare region for children. Right. So that area.
So
over 45% of the kids in the province live in the Fraser Valley.
Yeah.
So in the Fraser Health Region. So we built our second purpose-built hospice in Abbotsford. So it's right next to the Abbotsford Hospital, and it's on something called Campus of Care. There's 3, there's an adult hospice there and a kind of a youth disability care place called Matthews House, Abbotsford Hospice, Matthews House, and then Canuck Place. And it's called Dave Letty House.
Okay.
So
who's Dave Letty?
Dave Letty runs Ledcor.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
So he generously donated a significant amount of funds and also helped build the Purpose Built.
Yeah.
So we have 4 patient beds there and 4 family suites. So provincially, we have 13 patient beds and 8 family suites.
Okay.
And that services the entire province for care.
Wow. Well, I'm going to talk about who your patients are and also about your funding in a minute, but let's go to your team. So we won't go through everybody, but let's, and not that I don't want to talk about the board, But I want to talk about the people who are actually involved from day to day. So going on to your staff here. So
our CEO, Margaret McNeil. So she's our chief executive officer, and
how long has she been?
She's
CEO
been there for 7 years.
7 years. Okay.
So
it's about the same time as yourself, actually.
Yes. We started around the same time. Yeah, I think Margaret started just before Mary. So yes, she's an incredible leader. And has been foundational, in not only in healthcare, but also in leadership, and then also supporting the vision for the organization and bringing the teams together.
Yeah.
So she's been amazing. And Dr. Hal Seiden, he's our medical director, so he's world renowned.
Okay.
He is an expert in pain management and an expert in pediatric palliative care. Asked to go all over the world to present to also really, really good researcher in the area of pediatric palliative care, which is, a very, very new, area of research. And so is
this pretty much his full-time gig as far as he's not running other practices?
No. He is the medical director. And as most physicians do, he has a placement at BC Children's. He's there and at UBC.
Yeah.
Right. But he is, he runs our team. Tanis Miller, and she's the director of our nursing team. So she oversees, the majority of our staff.
How many nurses?
I would say we have probably over 65 full and part-time nursing staff.
Wow.
Yes.
And then you said earlier, 400 volunteers?
Yes. 400 volunteers, and that's Jessica Tremblay oversees that.
Okay.
So she oversees our volunteer team, but also oversees our housekeeping and our kitchen team.
Wow.
Right, and food services.
Could you use more volunteers?
Yeah, we are always looking for volunteers, and actually, right now we are looking for volunteers at both locations. We do really need some out in the valley. We need some more in Abbotsford as we've ramped up to providing. We just started 24-hour care in May last year, and so we really need some more.
Well, let's
staff
use
out there.
this as an opportunity to plug
more volunteers. CanuckPlace.org.
So I, again, being not very knowledgeable about a hospice of this nature and looking for volunteers, I would immediately assume, well, look, I work in the financial business. I don't know the first thing about healthcare. How could I possibly volunteer?
Right.
I mean, I don't know how to take care of kids.
We're not asking you to provide healthcare.
Right, exactly.
Well, I don't want you to provide healthcare.
I don't want
to
either.
Need you. We have ancillary
So what kind of volunteer? Can you give me some real examples of the kind of things that you need?
Yeah, we need help at our front desk. So when we have people coming in, and on weekends, we need that because we don't have full-time staff that are working on weekends. We just have our nursing staff that are operating the second floor, but we need kind of somebody there. We need garden volunteers. The gardens are a really important place for our families. It's where they kind of go to relax, and keeping the upkeep of that is really, really important. We need kitchen volunteers. We need housekeeping volunteers. We need kind of operations support volunteers. So people that are good at fixing things. We do have a facilities team, but we need help and support with those.
Sure.
We need sibling care. So supporting, looking after kids. And a lot of times, what we are really looking for is someone that can take a regular shift at a certain time of day, once a week, twice a week. That's really important to us, and it really makes a difference for our organization.
Wow. Can people volunteer even just for maybe an hour or two?
Yes. Yeah, they can. But what happens is we have a very, very, because we're a patient facility. Yeah. There are certain things that you could do, but it was probably you'd have to work outside in the garden.
Yeah.
You couldn't be in the hospice, right? No. So we have to go through a whole process where you get you need a criminal record check.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're a patient, pediatric patient area. Yeah. So you do that, but you get amazing training.
Yeah.
Our volunteer services team is incredible.
I can't imagine that you would not feel fulfilled in your life a little bit more by volunteering at a child's hospice.
Yeah.
I mean, I just
Yeah, it is. It's really, it is a really, really great experience. Can we go? I just want to share, because I didn't get to all my colleagues. I want to make sure, because I wanted to tell you all the people that.
Yeah.
So Denise Prale, and she oversees all our fundraising. Okay. So she works on all our areas of fundraising. And
does that include the gift of time gala?
No, she we do events, but she looks over kind of like direct mail and our corporate partnership team and our major gift team. So and then legacy gifts. So all those kinds of things. And then Carol Ellis, and she's our director of finance. Yeah, she's amazing too.
Good. Well, that's an amazing team. So let's talk about the children. You mentioned Fort St. James or Fort St. John. You get children from all over the province. And obviously there's going to be families that can't really afford to come down. How do they, like, does one parent come down with a child and the other parent has to stay up with the kids, or can you actually support like a family of 4 or 5, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, what happens is if a child is like declining or something that needs to happen, we're in contact with them. We have a 24-hour service. Okay. So we are, not only for inpatient, but we're 24 hours. So if there's a mom and a dad and they live in Fort St. John and they can't just drive to emergency because their kid has a rare disease that the emerge doctor's probably not going to know about.
No idea. Yeah.
We provide that 24-hour service so they can phone. We have the child's file. We kind of go through, and if we need to escalate it to a physician, we have a physician on call for 24 hours, so that the family is supported and they are provided. Okay, the G-tube fill out. Okay, here's what we're going to do, and so our team talks that family through and helps support them when there's challenges. At home and help facilitate. If an admission needs to happen, there are services in the province. So if a child needs to fly somewhere and go somewhere, they have access to that being covered.
Right, like the air ambulance and that type of thing.
Yeah, an area or just and coming down that they find a way to support. There's a way for them to support that. That's not a service that we provide. But we admit them and then bring them in hospice and provide the care. And then they also have a choice where they can book in advance. So that family from Fort St. John, they can book days, like they want some respite time and they want to come down to the city. They want to visit with other, whatever they want to do. They can leave their child with us if they need, and then they know that their child will be cared for, or they can stay in house and have a place to stay.
Because it's got to be so draining for some of these families. You've got 2 working parents and 3 kids, and one's terminal, and never mind the emotional, but just the daily, the daily challenges of life raising a family.
Yeah.
The really, respite care, I bet you, is really valued.
It's really, really, those 20 days. And, a lot of times, like if we, it doesn't happen, but sometimes we have to cancel that care because we get a higher acuity.
Sure.
But our families are so amazing because they understand, and we'll rebook. At another time, right? But sometimes that does happen, but they know that there might be a time that they might be in that same scenario, and they understand. So they're just, they're amazing.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about finances for a second. Of course. Because we're going to start crying again here. I'm gonna try. So you've got pretty good funding from the large part of your funding is from the provincial government, is that government funding?
So the Ministry of Health through PHSA, they provide about 40% of our overall operating for direct patient care. Yeah. So they provide 40%, and then we raise 60% of our funding through the community, and that's through corporate sponsors. It's through generous donors like you and Crystal who come to our event, and through partnerships and events, and then we also receive funding from the Canucks for Kids Fund, which is the charitable arm of the Vancouver Canucks. They've been
Is that those 50-50 tickets?
Some of those 50-50, right? Yeah. So the funds raised from those 50-50 tickets. They also have events that they do fundraising, and we receive approximately $500,000 to $600,000 annually, which is about 4% of our overall operating.
What is your overall operating?
Our overall operating is around
16 million.
Yeah.
Ross, can you just make that a little bigger so I can see that for a sec? I think one of the things that I always look at, and we talked about this briefly before we started filming, was about expenses.
Yes.
And I always like personally donating to charities that don't have a lot of costs associated with like fundraising and administration. But I think the point that you made earlier about the fact that you have 14% of your expenses are management and administration, $2 million out of that 16. But you had a good point. This is not just, this is not just people that are sitting at a desk trying to fundraise or, administrators. These are people who are providing healthcare services.
Right. So we're a kind of a combo, right?
Yeah,
we're a combo organization. So we are fundraising, but we're also managing, we're providing healthcare services. So, so the combination of those two things, that's actually a very low percentage for an organization that, your program director that's running the nurses needs an assistant.
Yeah.
But that's not direct patient care, right, necessarily. So
you're right. The numbers are good. I mean, if you add the two up together, it's almost 75%, which means, for those of you who don't really maybe monitor this stuff, to have 75 cents on every dollar go into supporting that the actual charitable activity is a very, very good number.
Yeah, it is.
The Gift of Time Gala that I'm familiar with, how much does that typically raise every year?
So this last, we just had our most recent event and we raised the most ever. It was 1.53 million.
Wow.
And so if you think about that as part of our overall operating, that's a significant amount of funds. Yeah. And it's also, it's not just the funds that are raised, but we're not a place that you can walk through. Right, necessarily that everybody has the opportunity. We're a small little organization, right? And we're not Children's Hospital, which if you have a child in Vancouver, you've probably been there. You've been to emerge. Absolutely. You kind of see how it unfolds, but that's not necessarily the experience of our organization. We're just smaller, so the platform, I would call it, or the ability to bring our families into a space like a big ballroom and have the family tell their story just gives us it's such a great opportunity for awareness that we don't have typically. So that's another reason that the gala, it's incredible support. We have this the women on our gala committee are stupendous. They're just they're wonderful.
They're very passionate about it.
They're so passionate and they're so supportive. And
it's a heck of a gala.
It's a lot of fun.
Another plug for that. So you guys expanded the number of seating this year.
Yeah, we did.
So if anybody wants to go to one of the city's best gala events, make sure you get your tickets next year for the 2020.
Yeah, the 2020 in October. Yeah.
In October.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important I think to emphasize to listeners that like other charities, when you hear these big numbers like, 1.5 million raised at the Gift of Time, how could my $20 or $100 truly help? But it can.
Yeah,
right?
it does.
If you drill it down to just simple things like meals for families, $100 or $20
goes a long way.
Goes a long ways, right?
Yeah, it goes. It's incredible. And we raise funds for medication. We purchase medication. We raise fund for. We need a respiratory therapist because a lot of our kids are trached. So they have that trach means that they have in order to breathe. They've had something cut in here, and they have a breathing machine that helps them. That's been put through through their trach. So in order, there's 10 different kinds of breathing machines.
Wow.
Right. So we don't have the expertise. So we need the support of that. We need support of pharmacy. So we have to have, not only do we need the medication, but we need a pharmacist.
Sure.
So we subcontract that. We pay for those services to BC Children's Hospital. Yeah. So those are real costs of healthcare. And, it's through events like the Gift of Time. And we also have another gala that we do in Abbotsford called the Gift of Love Gala. It's this amazing event as well. And it's through day-to-day donors who are, receive something from us in the mail or see us online, and they make a gift of $100. That goes such a long way with our organization. Yeah. It really makes a difference. Yeah,
that's the power of charities and fundraising, is if you can just get enough people to make that small donation, it can make a huge difference. Question about children, the types of terminal illnesses.
Yes.
You've been there for 7 years, but it's been around, the hospice has been around for 25 years?
25 years. It'll be 25 years next year.
Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, so the Gift of Time Gala is going to really be.
Yeah, it'll be really big.
Yeah. Okay. Are there certain illnesses that children just aren't passing away from anymore that they used to? Like, has that whole situation changed a lot?
Yeah, so that's a great. So obviously, one of the things that what is happening is that in many diseases, children are living longer.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that they're not terminal, but they're living longer. I would say, in our early days, and I know I've heard this from our medical director, Dr. Hal Seiden, we had a lot of children on program who had muscular Duchenne's. And that has changed the trajectory. So the kids who were diagnosed with that, sometimes the trajectory was about 16 years old, and that's changed. So
with muscular what?
Muscular Duchenne.
What is
Duchenne's.
that?
It's like a muscular. It's a type of muscular dystrophy.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it's to explain. I think.
But that's a specific illness.
It's a specific illness,
okay.
And so now the children on program. We don't. It's very. We do have kids with muscular Duchenne's, but they have to have a certain something it has to be a certain type that they have in order to be admitted on program. Where years ago we used to all took all the muscular Duchenne's kids, but now with drugs, and the things that have been researched and found, they're living longer. So there are there's kids that are in university, right? Wow. So they're they're not part of our program. So yes, there are illnesses that are changing, and I think the earlier one that I spoke about was SMA. That's also something that's changing. Children even with cancer. Right, are living longer because they've found different things that work better, and so there is a change in how in treatments, and what we've seen is children are living longer, but it becomes more complex because they are living longer and they're becoming more symptomatic and their health declines. But their trajectory is longer. And that's why, back to that point, our kids are on our program for an average of 7 years.
That's amazing.
Right. So it's not the word palliative kind of like, in hospice kind of like is messes things up to a certain point, because it's not like the framework of adult hospice.
I think that's why the story of Christian this year at the Get the Time Gala was such a great one, because I mean, they're all heart-wrenching stories, but the ones I've seen in the past are about the child who's 6 or the child who's 12 or 13. But here's a child who was 19. Now, question would be for you is, this is a hospice for children who are actually not even born yet, up to age of 19. What if Christian was 20 or 21? Because you're saying the average child is with you for 7 years before they pass away. But what if a child gets admitted into the program at age 14, but they're not passing away till they're 7 years later, so that makes them 23, 21.
So if we have kids that we call graduate from our program, it doesn't happen very often, but if we have children that do graduate from our program, we have a transition program and we try to support them in finding adult services. And Children's Hospital would have the same thing if they had kids who were on oncology and who graduated into the adult world. It's a tough transition, and finding the adult services that are available for that youth.
Is there now youth equivalent of the Canuck House? I guess there's just lots of hospices out there.
There's hospices out there, and so depending on what each scenario is. So a lot of times, what will happen is a child that has been referred to our program. Sometimes, like Children's Hospital, kids not graduate, but they stop, their services stop at 16. But they will have in their oncology program, because if that child has a pediatric cancer, they'll take a child who's 18, even though their number is 16. And then if the referral comes through Children's, we still receive that referral.
I see. And
we have received referrals even through BC Cancer Agency, because it's just like, the environment of that child and that family, they're still a child.
Oh, for sure.
So we make exceptions, but I would say that there's less about that exceptions and more that we stick to the rules. But
right.
But and that happens in healthcare at all the time.
Okay.
We want to make it happen for that family.
Yeah.
And if that family's been part of our program, we're going to do our best to support them. Whether that we provide them and share them with services that are available, or that we provide the service ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Debbie, have there been any cases for yourself that have been really a tough one, or is there any special one that you'd like to as we sort of go to wrap this up that you'd like to talk about? Because we did talk about Christian a minute ago, but I find the stories really sink in how important your organization is. Like we've covered a lot of bases, talked about the financials and everything, but do you have another story you maybe could talk about something that was kind of close to you, or something that was quite meaningful to a lot of the staff that would, the listeners listening to this might just really sink home why it's important to support Canuck House, and
So I'm thinking about a family that they're wonderful. They have there's 5 kids in the family, and they live near Victoria.
Okay.
And they have a little boy, and he has something called I hope this is the right way to say it, San Filippo. Okay. So it's a rare condition. He wasn't diagnosed till he was, I think, around 2 or 2.5. And so he looked completely, like a little boy, but they started noticing things that weren't happening in terms of his developmental, and he had developmental and physical delays. And he's now, he was walking and running and all those kinds of things. But what happens with San Filippo is the child, just their motor development declines, their ability, and they basically usually die before the age of 11. This boy's name is Heston, and he's a delight. And the family is so full of love and joy, and they know what's happening. And the mom is now, dealing with.
Out of interest, is he the youngest child in the family?
No, he's not. So there's there's twins that are after him. And I'm allowed to talk about this because they're very public, and this is a story that, I'm allowed to share. Sure, so we can't usually talk about our patients, but I'm allowed to. Yeah. But, and they are, they're the family that they're just looking for. They love coming to Canuck Place. The kids, they have a great time, and it is a great time for them to get respite. Mom and dad, they need a break, and it's like, their holiday time. They look at coming to, like, this is like, and he had a really bad reaction to surgery. He had to get his tonsils taken out, and he almost died. And they weren't ready for him to die yet, and he wasn't recovering well. And so they came to Canuck Place, and our team worked with them and helped support him and helped get him through and improve how he was doing. But it's just wonderful to see how this family is just looking at every moment. They know he's 9 or 10 now, and he doesn't have that much time left.
Wow.
And they don't know when he will pass. And that is the hardest part for our families. What they're dealing with all the time is uncertainty.
Sure.
They don't know.
Yeah.
And so how do they get from uncertainty to just let's just see what the day holds.
Yeah.
Let's make the most of this. And I love watching this family because that's what they do. And you see that, and that just brings me so much, it just makes you look at your life in a different way, and it makes you just be appreciative, right? And you have children yourself, you understand. It's like every day is a joy. And those little things that we take for granted, that we're like, oh my gosh, do I have to drive them there to their practice and do, you're running around, right? And you just think, how fortunate, how fortunate we are, and how great it is that Canuck Place exists to support families like Heston.
Families like that.
And know that this loss is going to be great for them, but they are making the most of every morning because they've been supported and guided by Canuck Place. And that when Heston does pass, Canuck Place is going to be there for them and the brothers and all the brothers, all the boys, everybody's going to get looked after.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen because of this community. Right?
Yeah.
Because the community that supports Canuck Place and all the donors that make that happen. It's that brings me great comfort to know that Heston's family is going to be looked after.
Wow. It's a great story, Debbie. Thank you for that. That's amazing. Has there been one more question for you? Has there ever been a situation where truly a miracle has happened, where a child was diagnosed as being terminal?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. So that has happened. And I think that our physician would tell us maybe 4 or 5 times, and it's cancer.
Ever, or 4 or 5 times a year?
No. 4 or 5 times over the last 25 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it does happen, right? Because the human body can do amazing things. And so that has happened. Yeah. And I actually know, like, I think about, I know of children who were diagnosed and thought they were being introduced to Canuck Place, and then a new treatment came out, or something happened. So that it has happened.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So if people want to donate to
yes.
the Canuck Place, if they want to follow you, I see you've got the social media here, Ross. So this is the Twitter handle, which is Canuck Place.
Mm-hmm.
So we can follow on Twitter. I'm assuming there's probably an Instagram
and Facebook. Yeah,
and Facebook.
All of the above.
And do you have any kind of donation programs? Like, I know a lot of the charities will do, like, like a automatic renewal of like $20 a month off your credit card, that type of thing. Do you guys do anything like that?
Yeah. So we have a Courage Builder program, and that's our monthly donor. So we call them, they're building courage at Canuck Place.
Yeah.
And that's available online. You can just go to canuckplace.org, and then you just kind of go, there's a big orange donate button up the top, Ross. Right. Yeah. You just go right to that donate orange button, and then you can look at the option, and the option of giving monthly. You have the option, whatever you would like to give at. Yeah. And, monthly donations are really, really important because they're consistent.
Right.
And it for any charity, not just Canuck Place, but it helps the organization have this understanding of longevity and where the funds are coming. So they know, and it's a really strategic way to give.
Yeah.
Because it's strategic in supporting the organization, do their planning. And it's also strategic as a donor.
Yeah. Wow. And I think if you donate, if I should know this because that's my job. I think if you donate over $400 a year or more, you get a higher percentage on your tax credit than.
Yes.
I think. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm not sure because things. Everything could change.
Yes, that's true.
Today.
Yes, we have
because of the election.
New government today. So.
Slightly new. Same, but new. Yeah. Same with more struggles. Yeah.
Do you have any Canucks players that donate? Has any been any Canucks?
Oh, yeah. Players have donated over the years. And I think one of the greatest things is the players actually donate their time because they actually, those fundraising events that the Canucks for Kids Fund have, that's player time, right? So that's players providing and also donating. And then,
you see those videos, the players coming into the hospice, and man, those kids, if they like hockey or if they're into the Canucks, because they light up in their faces. You can see it. Oh
yeah, it's I think one of the biggest things and the greatest, that partnership of being connected to the Vancouver Canucks, it gives, we have 765 children and families on our program. That's a small, portion, but high complex care, right? A small portion of the population, but big, high complex care. But if you think about that group that feels, day to day is a struggle and it can be very, very hard, to know that you have, that there's those hockey heroes out there that are, connected to them, it provides hope, right? And it provides hope and inspiration. And it's about looking forward to something. Mm-hmm. And we all need that, right? As human beings, we need something to look forward to, and especially when we're in difficult times.
Yeah.
And so that's been a real source of support for our kids and families to be connected to those Canuck players.
Yeah. Wow. Great.
Yeah.
Well, Debbie, this has been fantastic. Thanks for coming in today. This has been great.
Thank you.
And I only cried sort of once, so I can admit I've been feeling heavy-hearted here, but this has been great.
Yeah, well, thank you for caring. Not only just, your support, your generosity to our organization, but also, your wonderful wife, Christelle, too. She's been incredible. So we just really, really appreciate everything and the opportunity to talk to you today.
Yeah, great. Well, Debbie Butt from the Vancouver I kept seeing Vancouver, the Canuck Place Children's Hospice. Thanks for coming in today, Debbie. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.